Also, to make it easier for editing, I'll let you guys know now, for you, Regan, for editing the audio later. I hear you guys crystal clear in everything you say. So if you ask me a question and there's a few seconds before I answer, let the air sit dead so that Regan, you cut it together. It's because I'm having a coughing fit. I'm on push to talk, and when I'm done coughing, I'll push and answer the question.
Okay.
Okay. So I just trust that I've heard you. If maybe a minute passes and I haven't replied, then there might be a problem. But...
Yeah, cool. We'll call an ambulance at that point.
That's a lot of dead air right there.
Yeah.
A minute of silence. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Overcast Gamer Show of a Fortnight. My name is Abe Foster. It is the 27th of August, and I'm also joined by...
Regan Harper.
Hello. Oh, we say our names, not hello. I've forgotten. Sorry, guys. Do you want to start again, or shall I just go? That's our Valentine's here as well.
No, stick with it.
Just roll with it.
See, with podcasts, there's no visual element. You've got to say, do you want to say hello and not their normal voice? That's going to be confusing as shit for everyone.
Sulu's here. It's okay. We'll save the day.
That was great. Nice. Good one.
Well, fellas, what's been going on? How is everyone? And what have you been up to?
I'm well, to answer your first question. I haven't been up to much, to be honest. I don't know. I actually do want to talk about something really, really quickly before we get into the game stuff. And that is kind of like just little social quibbles that kind of come up from time to time. You know, everyone has them. Like, not waiting for people or getting out of the way with people on the bus, things like that. I had one this morning. I've talked about, mentioned briefly a couple times with, I've started cycling. And on and off, shall we say. But this morning I went out for a ride, and I tell you what, you don't really notice it until you're out on a bike, just how bad drivers are. I don't know if it's in Wellington or if this is a general thing, but you'll be cycling along way over to the left, and for whatever reason, the cars that pass you, there's kind of two types of people. There'll be one person who gives you ample room, like more room than you need, and genuinely like goes out onto the other side of the road and probably makes things more dangerous than they need to be. And the other person is the other extreme where they don't move over at all, and sort of you're sort of like almost in the car with them when they pass you. It's the fucking worst, man. Obviously, you guys don't. You guys would be drivers, but not necessarily cyclists. But I don't know. What would if you were going to pass a cyclist out on the street? What would your thought pattern be?
Fucking get out my way. I honestly, so cyclists do this thing, and it's like, it's really hard to it's not hard to explain. It sounds so much like the world's against me kind of thing. But legitimately, every time I try to pass a cyclist, as I go to do the old arc out to go around and give them space, they fucking wobble and arc out to the right as well. And I'm like, just maintain your fucking balance, stay over the side, or I will hit you and I won't care.
Interesting.
I'm sure probably a reserved cyclist who actually follows the rules, but that's rare in Karori. They're all just idiots riding up and down that fucking hill. They're always going up it, sorry, not down. They're always trying to go up it, but they're not fit enough to go up it, so they can't maintain their course and constantly swerve out into the road.
Right. Yeah. That's I suppose that's fair. As a cyclist, you should be sticking as far to the left as you can, right, without sort of being in the gutter. But,
I think riding a motorbike and a scooter for years, I've established a certain level of empathy for anyone on two wheels, be it motor or not. And if I see a cyclist or a motorcyclist, if I'm in my car, generally, or if the motorcyclist riding beside me in one lane, then that's they're an idiot. But if it's a normal cyclist, then I'll definitely try and give them as much room as possible, and just it's ridiculous how easy it is to kill someone. It's just, you think about how they're on this frame of aluminium and fleshy bones and blood bag, and you're in this giant steel container that's doing 100 kilometers an hour. and you can just vaporize them, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. Like anything goes wrong, it's game over. But I suppose it begs the question, like, do you guys have any other sort of like societal quibbles that like just get it, like when you see them or when you experience them, they just fucking really blow your mo?
There's two that spring to mind. I suppose they're not really things that like it's anyone's fault, but they make me anxious. The first one is the old 3-time ask, which I think we talked about.
Oh yeah,
on the stream a little bit.
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Which is be talking to someone and they'll say something like, "Oh, sorry, what was that?" Say it again, like.
Which this happens like quite a bit in New Zealand because we all mumble.
Yeah. So you go for the first one and you're, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that," and then repeat it, and then again you're just like, "I mean, I saw your mouth move and I heard noise escape." But I couldn't establish any of what you just said. And then if it gets to this point, you pretty much just have to walk away from the conversation, because if you get to the third time, it's just not a conversation anymore.
Yeah,
it's just turned into this weird, awkward social faux pas.
Yeah, I see. That's the thing. I will usually go for the 3rd time ask, but it will be like, "Hey, look, I'm really sorry, I didn't catch that. One more time, please."
and then
if you don't get that one, you're fucked. You're like, at that point you've just got to admit defeat, say, "I got nothing.
Yeah,
I'm sorry." And
at that
leave.
point, it should be acceptable for both parties to just turn their backs on each other and
just leave, just forget that it ever happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
Just erase it from memory.
When it gets to that point, I just quote the butcher from the Mr. Small book, or Mr. Quiet book, sorry. And I just go, "Can't hear you. Next, please." And just wait for the next person to come up and start talking.
What the hell was that obscure reference, Balthazar?
Do you never read the Mr. Men books when you were a kid? Maybe they're too English. But Mr. Quiet, and he'd go into the butcher and he'd be like, "Can I have a piece of meat?" And the butcher'd be like, "Can't hear you. Next, please." And then the next person would walk up and be all boisterous.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, I do know the Mr. Men books. I don't think I ever read them, but I know like they're recognizable and stuff like that. But that's my main one. And then the second one, which is just awkward, depending on who initiates it or who fucks it up as would be, the sort of trying to get past someone who's coming the other opposite direction, and you end up doing that weird dance.
Oh yeah, and you walk into each other. Yeah,
but then I always end up, if it happens, so you do the 1 step and the 2 step, and again I think it's this magic number of 3, because if you get to 3, you've lost. You've just lost life. It's just the end.
See, I'm okay with that happening if you're both conscious of the situation and you're both just consciously tried to swerve in the same direction, and you go the 1 and then the 2, and then it's like, ha ha ha, and you can walk around, that's kind of funny. What gets me about those situations is when the other person is on their phone or doing something, so they genuinely are unaware of it, and you're doing your best as a regular human being who is conscious of their surroundings to get out of the way, and they walk into you. It's like, fuck, mate. Imagine if I were a car, you'd be fucked right now.
Yeah. Well, see, what really terrifies me about that situation is the fact that it theoretically it could go on forever. Like, you think about that.
As in, like, you both just make the decision to
exactly.
Step in
there's just this horrible coincidence that you always go the same way forever.
Abe just doesn't turn up to work. Where's Abe today?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
He's
Cuts
still
to
trying to get
Abe, and he's just walking. He's just trying to sidestep someone. That's great.
He's stuck on Gusley Street again. It's like, when it gets to 3, I've done this before. I have pointed with both fingers in the direction that I'm going to go.
Yeah, but then what if the person goes, he's telling me to go in that direction? Because I would probably do that. I'd be like, if he's pointing there, okay, sweet, I'll go that way. Oh, man, there's no winning.
It's a losing battle, that one. You just have to sort of suck it up and hope it doesn't go on for an eternity.
But yeah,
but those are my 2. What about you guys? You got any that spring to mind?
I've got 2 as well, really. One is a recent one that only came about because of this one particularly annoying woman that I encounter every single morning when I bus into work, which is my hatred for people who don't wait for people to disembark the bus before trying to get on.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah, there's this woman who at the Manor Street bus stop in the morning, she'll walk up and she'll stand right up in front of the front doors to the bus. So as soon as they open, like there's no way past her because she's a large woman and she's just blocking the whole way. And there's like 5 people trying to get off. And it's reached a point now where she'll look through the doors. And if she sees that I'm at the front of the people trying to get off, she'll step to the side. She knows otherwise I'm going to call attention to the entire populace around us to the fact that she's large and impolite and in my way. And she doesn't want that embarrassment anymore. So that's nice. But I do hate that. That and just general bus etiquette. Kids who don't get up when an old person's clearly struggling to stay standing on the bus because it's swerving a lot and they're just sitting there talking, fucking taking up 2 seats with their bags and Kids,
it'd be even worse for you, Balthazar, because being British, you've got that inbuilt sort of chivalry going on as well, and queuing, and the thing, getting off trains, getting off buses, and before getting on, waiting for the people who are getting off. That's inbuilt in you. New Zealand, we're still getting used to that. Where we've got a little bit of Australia going on, we've got some Britain, we've got all sorts of things. So that's not inbuilt. That's not in our blood quite yet. So
yeah. It's just weird because it's like there's a proper way to do things. Just do them that way and everything will be fine. But people don't do them that way.
No, there totally is. And when I was over in the UK, I felt it was amazing. Everything just worked perfectly. Everyone waited for each other. On the escalators in London, everyone stands on the right-hand side to let the people who want to go fast and walk up go up the. It's amazing. Everything just falls into place. It's really good. Wall
huggers as well, just speaking of rules and following them, when you're walking down the street and you've got those people who insist on hugging the wall and walking along it, even if that means walking on the right hand side of the footpath, not the left hand side of the foot. It's like just walk in the direction the foot traffic is going in for your direction. I don't care if you're so obsessed with sliding along the fucking wall that you're going to be on the right. Again, if you're coming at me, the correct thing is for me to go to the left around you. So if you're right up against the wall, I'm going to pry you away from that wall to get past you.
I remember on Lambton Quay in particular in Wellington, because the foot traffic is so intense there, trying to get into a shop or trying to get around someone coming out of a shop is a nightmare. Because there's this traffic going north and south, so to speak, and then one coming from horizontally out from a shop. It's insane. I've seen people like almost get mown down by foot traffic.
It's great. Just trampled to death on Lambton Quay.
Yeah. And my other one is public displays of affection.
Oh yeah. We had a quick talk about this in our Slack chat earlier in the week. So the old PDA, eh?
Yeah. So my view is you should only do something if what's the best way to explain this? So essentially, if you don't do it, let's say, then people who don't want to experience it don't have to experience it, and you can go somewhere else where there aren't other people and enjoy it yourself. However, if you do it in public and there are people around you who actively don't want to experience it, you've just ruined their day. There's no way for them to not be able to see it if you are doing it in a place where they will see it. It's like the whole argument with workplaces having music playing. If you want music, put headphones in. If someone doesn't want music and you've got music playing over the work speakers, there's no way for them to do their job and not have to listen to music at that point. Putting their own headphones on doesn't get rid of the music. It just means they're listening to their own music, not that. It's like cater for the people who want nothing, not for the people who want something, really. Like that's my view. Again, it's a British thing. Like just put up with having nothing. Why fight for things? Just put up with the fact that you have nothing. You don't need anything. It doesn't matter.
See, let's stick with the PDAs specifically because like I understand the logic of what you're saying. It's fair enough. But I feel like there's a line. So I think just a peck on the cheek or just a quick, peck on the lips is not too bad because it's, it's a fraction of a second and it's kind of done and it's really just two people, saying goodbye for the day or whatever. I think when it gets to the point of like standing in the street snogging, like I'm 100% on board with that. But I think just a quick like...
Hang on. You are on board.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I should say I'm 100% on board with what you're saying with regards to PDAs if it's full on snogging. So I think there's a line there. And I think if I saw a quick peck out on the street from a couple, I'd be like, oh, that's nice. They care for one another.
Yeah.
So what do you gain from it? The follow-up question is, you said if it's a quick peck that's a microsecond, that's like in place of saying goodbye, what do you gain from doing that? Because it's not long enough to be pleasurable for either party. It's just routine to do that instead of saying goodbye, at which point I'd say language was invented for a reason. Just say goodbye.
Yeah, I understand. I suppose it's more than just necessarily language. Like, as humans, you know, we are physical beings, and it's just that extra level of goodbye. Like, I mean, it would feel very transactional and very formal if it was just kind of like goodbye. That's something I could do with my mate, and it just kind of, I guess, you know, as a means of supporting one another, I guess, in our goodbyes, and saying, you know, have a good day. I'm here to support you. You're here to support me. Blah blah blah. But, you know, I think that might be kind of going too far down the rabbit hole. At the end of the day, I understand what you're saying, but I just think that, you know, we should allow at least a little bit of concession for those people who, you know, are just all about sort of, I guess, I'm going to sound like a freaking hippie by saying this, love.
See, yeah, I fall somewhere down the middle as per our usual viewpoints. I think it's all about context in terms of where it happens, and I also think it comes down to respect, and that you respect other people when you're out and about, and you don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. That's one of the things I focus on nowadays, is not making other people uncomfortable.
Sure.
In any way, shape, or form. I want people to feel good about themselves all the time, if possible. And if that means, you know, not doing PDA, then that's fine by me. I think that's good. If that's going to make someone feel more comfortable, that's absolutely fine. But in the same way, I can definitely see, because as you mentioned, Reagan, it means it's showing you care, and it's saying about 1,000 things in one small gesture. So I can see the practicality of that as well. So I'm not completely against it, but I am against, you know, making people feel uncomfortable. And if you do it,
if you're eating someone's face off, you're not telling them that you care. You're getting a hard on in the street. You know.
yeah, exactly.
So even if it's just a peck, is there still a place? You know, we say place and time for everything. Is there still a place? So let's say, for example, you're walking along a footpath and they stop to kiss goodbye in front of you, and the footpath isn't wide enough. You know, maybe you're at a junction, you can either go right and, you know, continue walking, or you can go left and cross the road, and they're right in the middle of that thing. So you can't actually go in either direction because they're right there. Is that, even if it's only, you know, a second or two, because it's just the goodbye, is there also does a place factor into the equation as well?
Yeah,
totally, man. Yeah, I think that comes back to context.
To the side for sure. Yeah, you know, and that
kind of thing. That's what Reagan did. That's what started the whole discussion. He blocked my path towards work, macking on his girlfriend. So
just threw him under the bus.
That's my second username now, the bus.
The bus. Amazing. Anywho, let's move on.
Yeah, I don't think we really have a right answer for that one, but obviously we've all got our different viewpoints, and I think it's all about context. Respect and context. Respect the context. So, yeah. Reagan, you have been watching one of possibly my favorite show in the world, The Simpsons.
Well done. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes, I have. So the other day I was on YouTube. This has all started off, I think maybe you guys have had a couple conversations in our Slack channel a bit around The Simpsons, just kind of colloquially sort of thing. And yeah, I was kind of like, oh, well, you know, I've always enjoyed The Simpsons, but I've never really delved into The Simpsons, if you will. I watched it as a kid, and I'll watch it when it's on and enjoy that particular episode, that kind of thing. And then the other day, it might have been in the stream actually, I asked you, Abe, because you're a huge Simpson fan, you know, has The Simpsons gone downhill? And I was surprised by your answer in that it's been downhill since, you know, season 8 to 10 kind of thing. Like, it took a big dive around then. And so I went on YouTube and I watched a couple videos of sort of commentators or people that love The Simpsons talking about it, and, you know, the fall of The Simpsons. And it turns out since season 8, the Simpsons community have called basically the last sort of nearly 20 years of Simpsons the zombie Simpsons, where you know, where it's just not the same thing as it used to be. And so I've started from season 1 and I've nearly finished season 1, and it's great. It's very cool.
It's season 1 and season 2 are very a lot more moral than later seasons of Simpsons, I think, and in a way that's probably a little bit too overt. The later seasons have a nice melding of the morality and the sort of humor and things like that. Season 1 and season 2, it's more like there's two. It's a duality. So there's sort of like the moral part, and then there's the funny parts.
Yeah,
they don't really meld them together that well in season 1 and 2. But they are still incredibly well written episodes. And
I feel like I'm with season 1. It's kind of I think I'm up to like episode 10 or something like that, and it's they're still finding their feet a little bit. Like the first couple of episodes were quite, well, I don't want to say clunky because they were still great, but they're sort of finding their feet, finding exactly where their niche is going to be, and really sort of starting to kind of hit their strides about now. So I'm really looking forward to sort of season 2, 3 sort of thing, just to see really how they hit their stride and they really get into that mode of the brilliance that was, well, apparently the first kind of 10 seasons. So yeah, I'm pumped. I'm looking forward to doing a bit of TV watching, which isn't something I would normally do. So yeah,
no, it's good, man. Once you stop seeing it through the lens of just being a little bit of light entertainment, and you delve into the satire and the commentary on the media and the commentary on, you know, the American apple pie type family and the nuclear family and all that sort of thing, it's brilliant. It is absolutely magnificent piece of television. The seasons 1 to 9, I would say, 1 to 8, 1 to 9 sort of thing.
Yep.
So
yeah,
it seemed to go downhill at around the same time as just the formula for sitcoms changed. I think that's when it all just died, really. Like, if you think about it, you maybe haven't thought of it, Abe, in a broader context than just, you know, isolating and acknowledging where The Simpsons got worse and what it started doing that made it worse.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it a bit recently and trying to connect it as a whole to why the sitcoms of today are trash compared to the sitcoms of the 90s.
Yeah.
And it's because it's essentially the same reason as Simpsons. A sitcom used to be take a bunch of normal people, put them in a scenario that, you know, is tangible, extremely unlikely, but tangible, and see how these normal people react and try to get themselves out of this somewhat absurd situation. And, you know, that's very much what the early Simpsons was as well. A lot of it was just, you know, how are they going to get out of this one this time? This situation has been thrust upon them. They don't have the tools to deal with it. How are they going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And it was the same with shows like Friends and Seinfeld and things like that. Whereas nowadays, the formula for sitcoms, which also is the same formula used for The Simpsons in general in the later seasons now, is let's construct a scenario and that let's construct a very specific scenario that's not, you know, tangible or anything, that's just completely off the walls, would never happen to anyone bar me, and make it so that they can't get out, and in the end they just have to go home with nothing. And that's ultimately what every sitcom these days does, and that's what every episode of modern Simpsons is as well. It's what can we do that's more ludicrous than what we've already done, and how do we get them out of it? Oh, we can't, let's just have them all go home unhappy. Like, that is modern sitcoms.
It is. They're very plot driven, very exposition heavy, and they're not based around characters. They're based around plot as opposed to character, which I think is where Simpsons especially fell off, as they stopped respecting the characters and how the characters would act, and the inherent comedy that just comes from these people being in these situations. It's the situation's funny now, not the way this person reacted because of their personality is funny. Which I think is a big issue. But
I think for me, the big difference there is kind of just the style and pacing of the jokes as well. Like, if I think about the most abominable show I can think of these days, which would be Two Broke Girls, every single line is a one-liner, and it's awful, and it's all canned laughter, and it's just terrible, as opposed to what I've seen from The Simpsons so far, where there is no canned laughter, and the jokes might be 4 or 5 phases long, and, you know, and they just kind of, there's no room for canned laughter sort of thing, which was a point that came up on one of the YouTube videos that I watched, and so I've really noticed that. But yeah, it is really interesting to kind of observe and see, and also I think from watching it get an impression of how much or how big the Simpsons were at the time, and how revolutionary it was, because nowadays we have Family Guy and Futurama and yada yada yada. But The Simpsons were the thing. They were the first of that sort of ilk, and so it's quite cool to see it from that perspective as well. So, yeah.
You're a little bit older than us, Reagan. Do you remember Simpsons Mania?
I wouldn't. Maybe. I remember like lots of kids having Simpsons lunchbox and things, like lunch boxes and toys and things like that. But I wouldn't say I was old enough to really be wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was huge. I was just never there to get a sense of exactly how big, I suppose.
Yeah. See, I remember my neighbor having a Simpsons CD with Do the Bartman and all that, or probably a tape. I imagine actually with Do the Bartman and all the sorts of songs and things on it. And I didn't really understand at the time, but that was obviously part of that whole manifest of the Simpsons taking over the entire planet, pretty much sort of thing.
Yeah. But no, it's good. I'll keep you guys in tune with how I get on.
Very good. Well, we'll move into movies in a minute, which is our minute-long film reviews.
Popular segment, this one. Popular segment.
Absolutely. We've got Balthazar this week. Balthazar, what movie are you going to be doing?
So I've seen 3 movies this week, of which I had to choose one, obviously. And, so I've seen, the 3 I watched were John Wick 2, which was a thoroughly enjoyable film.
Yep.
The Great Wall, which was a terrible yet thoroughly enjoyable film. And so I decided, instead of those 2 movies, which most people would have heard of, to review the third one that nobody will have heard of or know anything about at all, which is Gintama the movie, which I saw at the Embassy. It's a live-action adaptation of an anime. The backstory is I haven't seen any of the anime or read any of the manga before, so this was my first experience with what it is. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. So the gist here is we give you a minute. You've got to essentially, give us your review, your best review.
Yeah.
And start timer music now.
Okay, so Gintama the movie, just as a movie, its plot was pretty straightforward. It follows the story of a katana that has an AI built into it so that it learns and adapts and evolves the more it's used, so that ultimately it will become the strongest weapon and can defeat anyone. This katana gets taken by the bad guy who uses it to murder people, gets stronger, and the hero, Gin, has to come in and save the day. Pretty straightforward stuff, both for, hero-themed things and anime-themed things.
30 seconds.
There's a lot of references in this one to other anime, so there's Dragon Ball references, One Piece, stuff like that. So it's, even if you haven't seen Gintama, if you've seen anime, it's enjoyable in that regard. The visuals were pretty atypical for Japanese stuff, to be honest. They were very bright and colourful. The acting was what you'd expect. It's that live-action anime style of over the top, and the sound was with some pretty good katana sound effects, really, for the fighting.
And
time, yeah.
Nice, you got an actual stopwatch there.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
Very good. Awesome, man. I'm pretty intrigued by that, and that it has that whole meta aspect going on, and it's commenting on a whole bunch of different anime and stuff like that. So that sounds really cool.
Yeah, so it's set in a world where anime and manga and stuff like the ones we know exist within that world as well. So they all grew up watching Dragon Ball and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty interesting in that regard. I had no idea going into it what it was. The first 20 minutes, I was completely lost. Not because it was, following on. It is actually it starts at the beginning. It is a live action adaptation of, I think, the first season. I was lost because I didn't know, I guess, the flow, the pacing of this anime, and that the first 20 minutes was going to be filler. Basically introducing characters, but in just ludicrous ways that made no sense. And I was fingers crossed that wasn't going to be the whole movie. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was just the first 20 minutes.
And how did this come to your attention? Like that it was available at the Embassy and all that sort of stuff?
Hannah found it was on at the Embassy. It's an anime that she watches, and she was like, let's go see it. I was like,
nice.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
nice. Sure. It just happened to coincide with, because you don't watch many movies at the cinema sort of thing. It just happened to coincide with us doing these film review things and being a pro if they're at the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, normally the last time I went to the movies before this was Star Wars Rebel 1, and if I hadn't gone to see this, the next thing would have been The Last Jedi. So I pretty much go to the movies once a year for the annual Star Wars release. That's it.
Nice. Disney thanks you for that. Well, that's awesome. We will move on to what we've been playing. I'll start this time. Why not? I have been playing the last 2 of the Crash Bandicoot games in the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. I've finished the trilogy now.
Nice. Man, you smashed through those last 2 really quickly.
I did, and that's because they get easier as they go along.
Oh, right.
Crash Bandicoot 1 is just ridiculously hard in comparison to Crash 3 Warped. Crash 3 Warped is it's a piece of piss, to be honest. It's not very hard at all, but there's a couple of stages that had me, again, punching the wall in anger, and those were the motorbike stages. So we'll start with Crash 2. Crash 2 is a better game than Crash 1. Crash 3 is also a better game than Crash 1. They both look really, really good. Crash 2 is where they start to... The variety gets a lot... there's a lot more variety in the level designs, and they start having new mechanics like being able to body slam and things like that. Crash 2 is also... It seems to be a little bit pulled back on in terms of the perspective on Crash. In Crash 1, you're quite close to his back. Crash 2 is a little bit further back and sort of up a wee bit as well, which kind of makes it a bit easier to see. You've got more of a FOV, I guess. You've got more of a field of vision. And Crash 3 does it even more, so you're even further back, and it just seems like it's a little bit too easy in my opinion. But Crash 3 is where they step the shit up, because they start going into underwater levels where you ride on little jet ski things and flying planes and motorbikes and the Wumpa Fruit Bazooka, and it's great. They're all really, really interesting, inventive little additions, and they all just work so well with that game. They break up the pacing really well. I think I probably knocked out Crash 3 in about 3.5 hours. So it's not very hard, but it's easily the best of the three. Crash 3, I would struggle not to give a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you don't think that the lower, well, obviously you don't think that this is the case, but the lower difficulty takes away from it in some ways? No,
I don't think it's it's not boring easy. It's still challenging, but it's not. I know I'm going to be stuck on this bit for, I'm going to invest 10 to 20 lives in this one area because it's down to precision, pinpoint accuracy. It's not down to, there's a lot, they give you a massive margin of error in Crash 3 as opposed to Crash 2 and especially Crash 1, where it is all absolute precision jumping and precision platforming. Crash 3 is definitely the sort of, it's a really good entry-level platformer, I would say, for people. If anyone hasn't played Crash Bandicoot and they're just getting into the Insane Trilogy, I would actually advise them to start on number 3, because you'll enjoy it a lot more than if you start on Crash 1, in which you will you'll murder someone or something by the end of it. It's a toughie, that one. Yeah. But no, absolutely love my time with the Crash Insane Trilogy. It's not a game I'll ever sell. This will be a permanent fixture of my collection now, I think. And and the other thing I've been playing, which I sort of hinted at last week, I picked up while I was still playing Crash, actually, because at that point I knew I was going to be finished with this pretty soon, and that is Thimbleweed Park. So this is the point and click adventure from Ron Gilbert, who did Monkey Island and Broken Sword and various games like that. And Thimbleweed Park is it's done exactly in the style of an old point and click. So it's all pixelated and there's a lot of inventory management, I guess you call it. That's just got a bit of a stigma since Balthazar talks about inventory management. It's really good. Like, this is pretty much exactly what I want from a point and click. And when you play something like Broken Age, and there's these leaps of logic that you'd never get in a million years, and you have to combine the weirdest things with the weirdest things. Thimbleweed Park doesn't have that. It's very logical. You think, what are the properties of this object? What do I need to achieve? Could I use this object to achieve it? Yes, I can. Brilliant. I've got that eureka moment. I'm ready for the next puzzle, and it pretty much just keeps happening like that. Yeah. So it's got full voice acting as well.
Oh, wow. So it's essentially all of the things that you didn't like about games like Broken Age, and what you were looking for, those things are fixed.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, those things are gone. I mean, items behave like they should. Items have the properties that they should be assigned in real life, not Broken Age, where some sort of weird, like, piece of metal that you don't really know what it's supposed to be used for, and it kind of looks like a drinking straw. You could smash an egg open with that. No, who the hell would have possibly guessed that? In this, I found, slight spoiler. It's only one piece of one puzzle. There, I needed to get a blood sample. So I went into a bathroom and I ripped off some toilet paper and I used that to take a swab of blood. And that's just what I mean. It's like, yeah, you could probably do that. So turns out you can.
Yep.
It's really, really good like that. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It also has multiple playable characters, which I don't think I've ever, I don't know if I've ever encountered, maybe like once or twice, but as this one has about 4 to 5 playable characters. There's a few that pop up in sort of flashbacks and things like that you also get to play as, which is really cool. And you can swap between these characters, and the items stay with those certain characters. So you might need to chop and change, give items to different characters and things like that. So it's actually quite deep in its mechanics and things like that. But it also has tons of cool little meta jokes and things like that. Like in the point and click adventures of old, you would have to do what's called a pixel hunt. So you would just be clicking on everything at one point if you got stuck, because you could pick up things in the background, something that might not look like it's an actual item. You would actually need that to proceed. So what they've done in Thimbleweed Park, one of the jokes that I really like is, if you walk onto a screen, there's these tiny white pixels, one pixel essentially, and you go and you can pick those up, and those are specks of dust. You can pick up the specks of dust, and the character picks it up, and they're just like, it's a speck of dust. Don't know what I'd use that for.
Awesome.
It's really good.
That's cool.
Yeah, but highly recommend it. It's about $35 on the PlayStation Store, and I think it's even cheaper on PC because it's been out for longer on PC. So pick it up if you're a fan of the old school point and clicks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I've been. Is it that all from you, Abe?
That's all from me.
Nice one. Nice. I haven't really played anything new this week. But I've sort of delved a little bit deeper into the games that I have been playing. A couple streams ago, we played The Long Dark, and I've been playing more of that when I've had some time to do some gaming. Mostly just stuck with the survival mode. So there's kind of 3 main modes to this game. There is the story mode, which is called Wintermute, which is sort of an episodic story mode, and you can play the first 2 episodes with that at the moment. There's a challenge mode where they set out, I think, 4 or 5 different challenges. So they put you in really shitty situations and you've got to try and survive them or meet certain objectives. And then there's just the survival mode where you just put out there and you've just got to survive. So I've played mostly the survival mode, but just recently over the last couple of days, I've delved into the other 2. So the challenge mode, for example, one of the challenges that you get put in a random place, and you have to climb to the top of this mountain to retrieve a flare gun so that you can kind of shoot off a flare, and then walk down to a lighthouse and shoot the flare off. And so that means that you're sort of traversing 3 or 4 maps. You encounter all of the things that you would need to encounter, and you've kind of got to keep moving the whole way through, which is something you're not really forced to do when you're playing in the survival mode. So that's really cool, and it's kind of forced me to explore a little more of the game doing that, which was good fun. And then the story mode, this morning I played 40 minutes of the story mode just to kind of delve into it, and I got the impression that it was sort of just like it's kind of like in Battlefield, where the story mode is in some ways just a tutorial for playing the rest of the game. So, pick up wood, make a fire, cool. Now go find some food, cool. Boil some water, cool. So we'll see how that progresses, because there's story to it. But it's striking that the game still has its claws in me after a couple of weeks of playing it, given how relatively simple it is, I guess.
Yeah, quite minimal, I noticed when you were playing it on the stream, eh?
Yeah, quite minimal, but I think there's enough in there that it does keep you engaged in that. I might have mentioned this on the stream as well, but it's the first game that I've really felt like it has made me feel like I'm writing my own story. And I genuinely feel like if I started playing a survival mode playthrough, I could just write what I did on each day, and it would sound like a genuine story from someone who's having to survive out in the wilderness. It would.
You could write your own journal or something.
You could write your own journal, and it would sound genuine, because the kind of situations that you come across are totally random, and you wouldn't expect. Like, one day you might say to yourself, "Oh, okay, cool. Today I'm going to go out on that lake and I'm going to fish, and I'm going to try and get enough food to last me the next 2 days, so that then I don't have to gather food on these other days. So then I can go do this other thing." So you're sort of planning ahead. but you might walk out on the ice and then a wolf will attack you, and you'll be like, oh no, well that's my whole plan turned to shit, and so now I have to kind of think around that while still dealing with what I can deal with, and it's really cool the way that it sort of shifts in the tide turn, and really really great game. So it's cool if you're into that sort of thing. Definitely pick up The Long Dark.
Nice one, man. And that was on Steam, right?
That was on Steam. I think for about, I guess it was a little bit expensive for the kind of game that it is. I think it was about $40 or something like that. Yeah. So not 60 plus. Yeah, so that was all good. And the other game I've been playing, which we did the stream on the other day, is Sonic Mania on Switch, which
yes,
fantastic. Really, really, really just fantastic. If you're into Sonic as a nostalgia piece, then it totally ticks all of the boxes there, and also gives you enough really for it to stand on its own as its own game as well. It's hard to talk about it though in a way, because it's sort of like you say, oh, it's Sonic, and yeah, it's
that's what it is. It seems it's very rarely that a game has no missteps, but from the 2 hours I watched you play that on the stream, it seems like that's the case with Sonic Mania.
If someone came to me and asked me to describe it, I would say it's just like what you remember, except it's taken a little bit further. So they've taken a lot of the mechanics and the kind of core DNA of those Sonic games and absolutely kept all of that, and then also sort of dialed up a lot of the mechanics and the levels where because there's a couple levels that are just brand new, but they still keep the same sort of vibe and feeling of those original Sonic games, yet give you some really cool new mechanics to sort of crank the speed up, or all of those kind of things, give you a whole lot more verticality in the levels and that sort of thing. So it's it's really great. It's really cool. It's like I say, it's hard to sort of say too much about it because it is what it is. But and it's cheap. It's like $24 or something like that on Switch. So if you were playing it on Switch, then that seems perfect to me, because it's in my mind the perfect kind of take where you out into the world kind of game, play it on the bus, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Does that have a multiplayer on that game as well?
It does, yeah. I think it's got
nice.
so you can play the Joy-Cons, that sort of stuff.
Perfect.
So, yeah. The general modes, I think, are kind of Mania mode, which is just playing through the story. There is a time attack, and then I think the 2-player co-op kind of mode. So yeah, really, really cool. And yeah, that's kind of been it for me, really, just those 2 games.
Nice one. Balthazar?
Yeah, I've been playing things which are new for me. Also, they're kind of not. So the first thing I'm playing, Wolfenstein New Order. Played that game way back when it was new, and just remembered really enjoying it. And what was it, the project? Oh, I was watching the newest season of Archer. And of course, Krieger's making his Nazi super soldiers, and I was like, I feel like playing some Wolfenstein. So popped that in. Very rare that I'll put a game in on a whim like that and actually play it through, but I'm on the final chapter now.
Nice.
On Uber difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty.
Holy crap.
And it's been a hell of a ride. It's been so fun. Everything that I loved about that game, I still love about that game now. A couple of years later, it's aged really well. In a lot of ways, it's better than Doom. In other ways, it's not quite as good, but on a whole, still a thoroughly enjoyable experience. I also forgot until I got to the point early on in the game that there's 2 timelines based on who you save towards the start. So the first time I played, I saved Fergus because that seemed logical. He was useful. And the second time I remembered the choice came up. And that last time I saved Fergus, so I saved Wyatt this time, who's kind of the young blood, not much to contribute to anything. And yeah, I've been playing through his story. And I don't know if you know, Abe, so the story doesn't change as such, but just kind of the way you can go through levels and tools available. Do you remember who you saved when you played it the first time?
Who are the 2 characters that you can choose from?
So Fergus is the kind of grizzled old commander of the group you're a part of, and Wyatt is the young kid who had bright blue eyes. Wyatt, the thing you remember about Wyatt is they talk about his eyes, and you remember if you chose to not save Wyatt that the kind of final boss at the end of the game has bright blue eyes, and they kind of flash back to remembering, oh, we didn't save Wyatt, so he's been turned into one of the super soldiers.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saved the old man because I was more attached to him.
Yeah, he was a cooler character. But I remember that. And so what's changed this time? Well, here's a mechanic that didn't even know was in Wolfenstein. I have a lockpick, and I can pick locks and open doors and sneak around. And like,
that's awesome.
The lockpicking in that game is the worst lockpicking minigame I've ever played in a game ever. But it does the job. Like, I wanted this time to unlock all the stealth perks and try a stealth playthrough. Since I was doing it on the hardest, I was like, well, stealth takedowns are always a one-hit kill, so this is probably going to be the easiest way to get through. So having a lockpick just made it the perfect match.
Can you explain the lockpick minigame?
So it only uses the right thumbstick. And basically what you have to do is rotate the right thumbstick until a little green arrow on the sort of dial that turns inside the lock mechanism lines up with the three the three latches or whatever that click open, and you have to hold it over the three latches long enough for them to all open up. However, while you're rotating that, the latches are wildly rotating left and right all over the place as well. So most of the time it's pure chance as to whether or not you can actually get all three of them to line up properly. You have no control over the latches, only the little green arrow. So all you can really do is move the arrow back and forth while the tumblers or whatever spin wildly out of control and hope that at some point they all line up. It's so terrible. But
Jesus.
So if you don't know that minigame, you definitely saved Fergus. And yeah, so it's been really enjoyable. I'll probably finish that up this afternoon and grab all of the difficulty related trophies in one go by playing on hardest.
Nice, man.
And then the other game I've been playing is a new game. I've been playing Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, which...
Oh, cool, you got that. Nice one.
Yeah, it was about 35, I think, on Steam. And it's a game. I'm enjoying this game. I really like it. But I think this game is... A lot of people are going to go into it, obviously, with different frames to go in for. It's heralded as a game that successfully, in a tasteful and a good way, approaches psychosis as a disorder,
right.
And kind of really tells a story that makes you understand and appreciate the sort of daily ordeals that people with psychosis have to go through just to achieve simple things. And so because of that, there's really two ways you can play the game. You can either play the game as the metaphor, that it's a metaphor for psychosis. You can understand that everything you encounter isn't really there. It's all just a manifestation of your own self-doubt and self-loathing, and that the big bad at the end, I'm not at the end yet, so it's not a spoiler. It's just probably what's going to happen because it feels pretty uninspired so far. The big bad at the end is probably just going to be her, but tinted black, the darkness inside her and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And you can go into it just knowing nothing's real, everything's a metaphor. And if you do that, it's just, the gameplay's good, but that's all. Like, for a game that's heralded for tackling those topics really well, I actually find if I try to play the game as though it's tackling those topics and playing the game as a metaphor for those things, it's incredibly dull and boring. If you play the game as though it's a genuine Viking tale of Norse mythology in which you're fighting all these gods and demons and trying to bring the only person who ever loved and had faith in you back from Helheim, dragging back, into the world of the living, it's a fucking cool game. And so even though it is supposedly a really good metaphor for those things, what Ninja Theory have failed to actually do is find a proper common thread to successfully marry the two ideas together so that you can play it as a fun hack and slash Viking game that is also a metaphor for these things. It doesn't seem to do that. You can either play it understanding it's a metaphor, in which case the Viking stuff has no meaning and is pointless and boring, or you can play it as a Viking tale, in which case the metaphors go over your head, but it is a fun game. And I think they really needed to come up with a way to actually successfully unify those two ideas so that it was just a fun experience that did both of those things. Because currently, it doesn't do both of those things at all. It does one or the other, and you can look at it one way or the other way. And whichever way you're looking at it completely kills any concept of the other way making sense or existing.
Right. So both those ideas can't exist simultaneously.
Yeah, in the way that they've told it, basically, like the only thing they've done, they did one thing to try and be like, hey, look, this is what unites the two ideas so that they can coexist, is they've made it so that whenever you die, you have this thing they call the dark rot, which slowly makes its way up your right arm. And so you are forced to die near the start of the game. So it introduces this mechanic. And after that, each time you die, the corruption spreads further up your arm. And if you die, if it reaches your brain, you fully die and your progress is wiped and you have to start the game again from the beginning because you're fully gone, kind of thing, which I dread to think that it's not a short enough game to do that. Like, that's really shit for starters. If I lose my progress when I'm near the end and have to start again, I'm not going to finish that game. I'm not going to be happy.
That's quite intense. That sounds like a Nier Automata sort of style.
It's an odd choice. But that is the only mechanic or thing they've done in the game to try and unite the two ideas, to be like, hey, the darkness is a metaphor for the darkness inside her, and if it grows all the way up to her brain, then, you know, she's fully succumbed to it and can't function as a human anymore. But in this Viking world, it shows itself by this curse that's taken hold of her, that if she doesn't, you know, successfully complete her journey before the curse fully takes over her whole body, she'll fail. That is the only thing they've got to try and unite those two ideas and bring them together. And it's not enough. Like, it's not enough at all. So yeah, I've been playing it the Viking way and just choosing to believe it's a story that's actually taking place in some Viking land kind of thing. And I'm really enjoying it in that way. I think you would really like this game, Abe, because the combat in it, when you master it, it's simple and you can get it out of the way if it's not your bag. But the puzzles in it are the one thing I'm not a fan of puzzles. You guys know this. I'm not a puzzle gamer. But there's one puzzle in one game that I've found the least obnoxious implementation of a puzzle ever, to the extent that I actually enjoyed it. And that was in God of War 3. You get to that garden where you play around with perspective to build bridges and things.
Yeah.
That puzzle is the puzzles in Senua's Sacrifice. It's all about perspective. It's all about getting things into, lining them up in a way that they make sense for you to then progress and get through the door or get across the bridge or whatever. It's that puzzle 100 times over in unique and different and interesting ways each time they do it. And so I actually really enjoy the puzzling in this game, and I think you would too, Abe, because it's mostly stuff like, to get through this door, you need these 3 sigils, but the sigils aren't physical things that exist in the world. You need to look around the world to find, maybe if you stand high enough up and from the right angle, you see that those 3 trees cast shadows that create the shape of that sigil, and then you focus in on that shape, and that unlocks one of the glyphs on the door, kind of thing.
That's totally me.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm really enjoying the puzzling in this game, and I don't enjoy puzzling in games, so it's really well done. I think I'm about 4/5 of the way through now, so almost done. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it all, but there are a few points where it's reminded me that, you know, it fails quite hard in a few areas as well. So there are a few points where even if you're playing it the Viking way, they don't make sense, because it just comes in and goes, oh, hey, remember, this is a metaphor. Here it is right in your face. Look, metaphor. And it throws it right at you and doesn't let you try to perceive it in a way that makes sense within the world. They just say outright, look, it's all in her head. Look, here it is. Look, there's her. That voice she was hearing, it was her all along. Like, it wasn't the devil or whatever. And when it does that, that is the biggest detriment to the game, is that nothing it does is subtle, but it doesn't trust that you're smart enough to get it. And so it still tries to outright spell it out and throw it in your face, even though not a single aspect of that game is subtle anyway. So that's the most disappointing part with it. The gameplay itself, it's a fun game. It's a good game to play, and I recommend it. But the actual topics it handles and the way it chooses to handle them don't allow you to enjoy the game. It's almost like it's just saying, hey, the people who have this disorder have a hard time with life, so we're going to force you to have a hard time with this game and not really enjoy it.
Right. So there's not that deep a commentary, really.
Yeah, it's very shallow. It's very in your face. And so I do highly recommend to anyone listening who wants to give it a go. I mean, obviously it's your choice. If you want to see how they handle that stuff, have a metaphorical playthrough, go for it. But I strongly recommend you have the Viking hack and slash happy, rummy, good times playthrough, because that is actually enjoyable. And yes, it will still break the immersion every now and again when it forces you to just look at the metaphor in particular areas. But for the most part, it's still really fun. There's a lot of creepy shit in there. There was a point I played last night where I was actually like, holy crap, this is actually scarier than any horror game I've ever played, which is really cool. And yeah, it's just a fun game. And for $35, it's, you know, for a new release, I haven't even talked about the visuals. Like, those are the best I've ever seen. So you can't really go wrong with it.
They're the best graphics you've seen in a video game.
Yeah, the way that it uses, so there's only really one character model in the game, and that's Senua. The other characters in it that you see are superimposed live action videos that they place in the world, and you know that the game's graphics are good when it takes you about half of the game before you can actually determine for sure that those are live action. Like, for about half the game, I was like, no, I still think they're the graphics. Like, if you look at his face and then you look at Senua's face, like, they're on par. They're the same graphical fidelity. And then I worked partway through. I was like, no, those are live action. So that means I actually genuinely thought that, you know, Senua's facial features and expressions and everything like that were you know, akin to a real person's. So yeah, I would say for sure. On the one hand, it's like I really want to see how it performs on the PS4. On the other hand, I dread to see how it performs on the PS4, because it's either not going to look as good or the frames are going to be shot to hell. So yeah, all the load times will be ungodly. But on PC, perfect port. I say port. I don't know what it was made for first, but it runs perfectly. No frame drops. Loading times are instant. Graphics are like among the best I've ever seen in a video game for sure. Yeah, $35 on Steam. You cannot go wrong with this game. It's really good.
Awesome, man. I'm just having a look on the old Metacritic. 85 it has, and that's for PC. So PlayStation 4, it looks to have 81. So slight.
And I'll bet those 4 points docked are probably for performance. There are probably people saying, oh, it doesn't run very well on the non-pro or something like that.
Yeah, most likely. But no, that sounds really cool. Just the description of those puzzles has sold me alone. So I'm well into that. I'll be picking that up and adding that to my list, my ever-growing list. But yeah, no, that's awesome. We shall move on to some news, because we actually have news for the first time in a wee while here. Balthazar, again, do you want to spearhead this first discussion topic, which involves Final Fantasy and Assassin's Creed together at last?
Yeah, that combination that everyone was praying for and writing Square Enix for, they finally listened to us, guys. It's the Assassins Festival in Final Fantasy 15?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Which, on the one hand, what the hell? Like, what are they doing? Who sat down and made that decision? Probably a whole board of people, but it's absurd. I haven't played 15, so, you know, I don't see how it fits into that world. Maybe it does. Reagan, you've played it. Maybe it's perfect. You remember meeting Ezio like 5 times, right, throughout the campaign? Like, I'm assuming that was the thing. But that said, the trailer for this festival looked better than the last lot of Assassin's Creed games that have come out. So, on the other hand, like, it's free DLC that actually looks somewhat entertaining and enjoyable to play.
Yeah.
So if I had this game, I would probably give it a go. I mean, it is coming out on PC soon. I will probably pick it up on that, even though its reviews aren't great. Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Reagan? Are you going to give it a go?
Only because I have the game already, I think, and it's just pure curiosity. It seems odd, and it seems to me like it's just purely a business decision. I'm not sure who would have instigated this. Was it Square Enix going to Ubisoft and saying, hey, Ubisoft, can we do this thing? Or is it the other way around? It seems, it's just super disparate to me. It has me really confused. But in saying that, like you say, the trailer looked kind of cool. I was quite impressed that they worked in sort of like some free running things and that sort of stuff into the Final Fantasy 15, because I wouldn't have imagined that the engine that was built in would have been great for that. But it looks like it's, it looks okay. They all get their own assassins get-ups, that sort of thing, which, I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of confused, but also sort of intrigued by it. And yeah, it's
a very, very odd partnership. I don't think anyone could have seen this coming. Square Enix and Ubisoft, what what similarities are there between?
And I mean, on the one hand, you can look at it and say obvious promotional tool for Assassin's Creed Origins, but on the other hand, what are Square doing? Like normally with something like this, it would be a mutual awareness and promotion.
Yeah.
But Square isn't getting anything for. I mean, they're getting some DLC and thing, but they're not charging for it, so they're not even getting money. Like what? I reckon it's a hard one because it's doing is raising awareness for Origins, which is purely beneficial for Ubisoft. But at the same time, on the question of who approached who, it seems like a Square would approach Ubisoft sort of thing, just because right now, what the fuck has Square done in the past 5 years that's of any relevance or that anyone enjoyed whatsoever? Whereas Ubisoft is making a turnaround. You know, they've got Rabbids coming out. They've got some other great stuff probably, I think, that happened over the past couple of years. Like, Ubisoft aren't in dire straits anymore, but I'd say Square actually probably are. Like, they've not made good decisions in a long time.
Yeah, aside from the MMO stuff, I would agree. Like, I was somewhat let down by Final Fantasy 15, in that it was quite short and there was not much of a story, and yeah, I was just like, oh well, that's kind of it. Final Fantasy in my mind, 150-hour plus kind of games, and this one I reckon I chipped off in like, I don't know, 50, 60 hours, which is still a fair chunk of time, but when you consider what the legacy of Final Fantasy, I kind of want my feeling here is that it's possibly just them looking at ways of sort of salvaging 15, I think.
Just milking a wee bit out of it.
Yeah. Just milking that teat for all it's worth,
It was a failed game. Let's see if we can turn it into something if we throw enough random incidental DLC into it.
Yeah.
Like maybe eventually people will want to buy it. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, it does. I guess the thing that Square has going for it with it is that I think it coincides around a similar time as the Steam release of 15. So maybe they're hoping to raise awareness to sell copies of that. But I don't know. It's Square are really fucking it up at the moment. Like as a publisher, they're doing all right still. I mean, Nier Automata was a Square published game. The Hitman game that actually did really well was Square.
They killed Hitman though. They killed that franchise. They're not doing anymore. They decided they're not doing anymore.
Deus Ex was an enjoyable franchise that they've also killed. What are they doing? Like nothing. They're actually doing nothing that makes any sense to anyone. And often they do that and then something amazing comes from it. But this time, like it's been too long since something amazing has come from them doing nothing. I don't know. I don't know how many people can continue to have faith in them, to be honest. Like they're in the position Nintendo was in sort of 10 years ago, I feel, at this stage, where everyone's just like, what are you doing? You used to be one of the greats, and now you don't even know how to wipe your own nose. Like, what is happening?
Well, speaking of confusing marketing decisions, we'll move on to the next item here, which is the Xbox One X has a Day 1 edition coming out, and it's called the Project Scorpio Edition. So they've essentially just catered to those people who couldn't let go of the codename. And just thought the codename was pretty cool. But when you make a decision to not call it that, don't go back on that. Don't heel turn again, Microsoft. What are you doing? This just reminds me of like all their heel turns on, back with their family sharing and all that sort of stuff and all that always online. And, they're just like, oh, no, sorry, we didn't mean to. I'm sorry, we didn't mean to offend anyone. And it feels like that. It feels like they're going back to they're dropping nuts again and just being like, oh no, please buy the X. It's got that cool name you guys want.
My question there is, and I'm trying to Google and find out right now, is what's the difference between?
I've looked. It
has the name Project Scorpio written on the back of the console in green in really tiny font, and it's on the side that points towards the floor when you put it down.
And it's also down the middle of the controller, but that is actually it.
That it has Project Scorpio written on it.
Yeah, it's cosmetic only.
Interesting.
I think even if they were going to not make it any different in terms of hardware and performance, I would have personally really appreciated if they changed all the text and everything on the back of the box so that instead of using real words, it went back to saying stuff like, with all the power of 60 teraflopping winger wangs, and just like they replaced all the real specs with just their weird techno shit that nobody understood.
Yep.
But I think that would also warrant it with the special name again. So it's like, oh look, they've gone back to when it was Scorpio. Nobody knew what the fuck was going on.
They're really pushing that 6 teraflop thing, by the way. I saw a photo of Phil. I saw an interview with Phil Spencer. Sorry, and he was wearing a shirt that just said 6 teraflops on it.
I'd like one of those actually. That'd be good.
That's pretty funny.
I think what they need to do is a bit of an education piece around exactly what the hell teraflops are, because I mean, we've looked into this multiple times, and it's like something about power. But I couldn't tell. If someone asked me, I couldn't give them a genuine explanation.
No. It's to do with the CPU processing information faster or something. I don't know. Yeah, that's all I can tell you. It's just not a selling point to me, and it's also how flippin' confusing is this for parents, for anyone really, for the people who aren't hardcore gamers, for the people who dip into the news or see Project Scorpio is coming out. Oh, cool. Oh, no, wait. What happened to Project Scorpio? It's Xbox One X. Oh, no, wait. It's Xbox One X Project Scorpio Edition. What? Yeah. What even is this thing?
Which one do I get?
Yeah. I feel so sorry for parents come school holidays who are just like, my son said he wants the Project Scorpio, but this says he's on Xbox One X. But then there's also the normal Xbox One X without the Project Scorpio. What?
No, maybe he wants the Xbox One S.
Yeah, and oh god, and get started on that. the fanatical bloody mishap they've got it done there. Speaking of terrible naming conventions, Nintendo has done something similar recently, which is they've released. It just does not stop. Nintendo, I thought they were stepping the game up. I thought they had their head in the game after the whole changing their online subscription thing to actually include a decent amount of stuff, bang for your buck. But then they go and they release a new 3DS XL Super Nintendo Entertainment System Edition, which is a new 3DS XL, which was, I had problems with that when that happened. This is the new 3DS XL. It's like, is that part of the branding, or are you just referring to that as your new 3DS XL? Who knows? But this is the new 3DS XL SNES edition. So it looks like a Super Nintendo, but it's a 3DS XL.
Is it the new? Is it the Super? Is it so? There's the new 3DS XL Super Nintendo, or does it look like the new mini Super Nintendo?
Well, it's being advertised as just the SNES edition, so it's not being advertised as the SNES Mini edition or anything like that. So I think it's just modeled after a regular old Super Nintendo.
Right. Okay.
But the thing is that it's being released in the same time frame, in the same window as the SNES Mini.
Oh man!
So
again, imagine being a parent going out this holiday season and being like, right, my son, he's worked really hard, he's done all the dishes this year, mowed the lawns, all of that sort of stuff. I'm going to go hard out and I'm going to get him exactly what he wants. And then you end up bringing home, a 3DS instead of a SNES Mini, or a SNES.
The wrong thing.
SNES Mini instead of a 3DS. Like, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. Surely there's people who know that this stuff must be confusing at these companies,
Absolutely. I feel like the marketing team is just, I don't know what they're thinking here. It's just ridiculous. You can't fuse two things together and call it something new and then expect people not to be confused by the three different things that now exist, this new fusion and the two previous things. It doesn't work like that.
See, we had a theory around this, right? And that was that essentially I reckon Nintendo have a warehouse full of new 3DSs just sitting there, and they're thinking to themselves, okay, well, we've released the Switch now, so people are probably going to buy that. How do we get rid of this 300,000 3DSs that we have sitting around? Oh, I know. We'll put a skin on them that makes it look like the SNES, and we'll sell them. Which from that perspective is kind of genius if that is in fact what they've done, but still very, very confusing.
Yeah, well, they've got all the hype surrounding the SNES Mini. Like, I've seen people are losing their absolute minds over that thing. Pre-order, the pre-orders aren't able to keep up and all that. So obviously they're coasting on the hype of that and just trying to get people to, pick this thing up and maybe think of that it's the SNES Mini or something. I don't know. I'm not too sure what's going on, but very, very strange behavior from Nintendo. But we'll keep an eye on that anyway. So I think we'll move on to the last piece of the show here, which is, as per last week, we've resurrected, which is our top 10 games of all time. And Reagan, I think you had some words about a particular blue hedgehog.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull a Balthazar here, and I'm going to refer to something that we talked about earlier, but probably for more of a nostalgic bent. And my top 10 this week is Sonic the Hedgehog. And probably, if I think back on it, Sonic 2, I reckon.
Nice.
But essentially, this is another one of those games that is just tied up with the early the early sort of time of my gaming life, where it's one of those ones where I can distinctly remember going, because I didn't have a Genesis until quite late in the sort of the life cycle of that console, if you want to call it that. And so for a good chunk of time, we would always go down and hire one out. We'd go down to United Video on a Friday night and hire one for, I don't know, $3.50 or something like that.
Nice.
And yeah, one of the games that they had a couple copies of, so you could genuinely pick it up, was Sonic 2. And yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that kind of resonated with me was that Sonic was, one, he was freaking cool, man. Like, he was a cool character, and he had like the spiky hair, and he was all about speed, and he had those sweet shoes on and all of that sort of stuff. But when you think about it from like now, when I'm looking back on it from a gameplay perspective, it was the first game that I remember playing that was really, he had momentum and fluidity to the way that he moved. And it wasn't the kind of thing where you would just jump in an arc and you would land and that was kind of where you stuck and that was it. If you hit the platform, then that's cool. This was a game where, the trajectory of his jump would change by how fast you were going, and when you hit the ground you would slide along it because you've still got that momentum and all of those sorts of things. And as a kid, just like struggling with it, having to sort of balance that speed and also taking your time to be able to kind of get through the levels and all that sort of stuff. So it was the first time for me where I really experienced kind of platforming that had taken that first step away from just being the basics of something like, let's say, for example, Alex Kidd was something that I played before that, where it was genuinely just you would jump, you would land, you would, and you'd punch, that kind of thing. There was not a whole lot more to it than that. But Sonic took that basic idea and added its own sort of physics and that kind of thing, and I thought that was really, really cool. And it was just fucking really fun. So, yeah, for me, Sonic the Hedgehog makes the list. Good job.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about that, because I've never really thought about that too in depth. But Sonic is still one of the only platformers that has acceleration in the movement.
Yeah.
It's not you hold down the button and you're going just the same speed all the time. It's that you have to work up to this high speed, via acceleration and things like that. And that's really interesting. That's really cool. I think that's a precursor to to that mechanic being used in later platformers.
Yeah, totally. And then you think about, okay, well, what are the implications of that as a movement mechanic on the level design and all of that sort of stuff as well. It's really genius, and it definitely sort of informed a lot of those games that came later on. But you guys were, I think, Nintendo kids growing up, weren't you? So you wouldn't have necessarily really been involved with Sonic early on.
My dad had a Sega Saturn, so I played sort of Earthworm Jim and Sonic and stuff that on that.
Yeah, cool.
Nice. Yeah, I had a Super Nintendo, but I didn't own that. We were borrowing it off a friend who, they were more well off than we were, and they always got the latest things, and they had the 64 at that point, so we got their SNES, and we just got to borrow that indefinitely. And then, I only played a Sega when we did a sort of house swap, and I went down to Cape Palliser, a little place called Tecopi. And me and my brother dug around in this family's possessions and found a Sega and set it up and
dug around in their possessions. Nice.
You can't stop a kid sniffing out a Sega, man. It's just impossible. Just a small correction there, Reagan. You mentioned Genesis. We didn't have Genesi. We had Master Systems in New Zealand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's easy to get confused because they talk about it online. Or Genesis that. It's like, actually, it was a Master System.
Yeah, totally.
Mega Drive Master System.
Stand corrected. Yep, apologies.
But no, that's awesome, man. I love Sonic the Hedgehog. Always will. Definitely going to pick up Sonic Mania when I can. Fantastic. that brings us to the end of another Overcast Gamer Show. Thank you again for tuning in. We can be found at overcastgamer.com on your RSS feeds. We've got an RSS feed that we'll pop in the show notes on YouTube when this goes up. And we've also got Twitter and Twitch, Overcast Gamer NZ, and Facebook. So you can find us all those different places. And we'll be back again same time next fortnight. Until then, take care. See you later.
Goodbye.